Let's get to our second matter, which has to do with labor, organized labor rejecting 18%. That's been offered by the government as far as their base pay is concerned. We have Ben Arthur, Chief Executive, Fair Wages and Salaries Commission, joining Dr. Kwabena Nyarko Otu, Chief Economist and Director, Labor Research and Policy Institute, Trades Union Congress, Mr. Kofi Bentil, lawyer and Senior Vice President, Imani Africa, and then Beatrice Annan, Member Legal Communications Team, the NDC, to discuss this matter. And of course, it's interesting to find that Beatrice also has an article that supports the community sentencing. She is outrightly against the custodial sentencing. Some of us, we think it should be there for some of the, the very sinful things that go on. Thank you. Now, some are surprised. Yes, some are surprised that the negotiations that have been going on so far for improved pay don't seem to be making any headway. There is 18% offered by the government, and the organized labor is not accepting it. They are asking for 60%, and even that, they said after the budget was read, there's an increment in VAT, you know that, and because of that, certain things have changed. So now they will take 65%, not 18%, not even the original 60%. We have a fresh letter. This was done as recent as 29th of November, 2022 by the University Teachers Association of Ghana. They are supporting what is going on and asking for a number of things. I will also show you what they are also saying, that the next academic year may also see them, going on some actions if government does not respect certain things. And they also want government to not freeze public sector employment completely, but to make room, particularly for universities, because they were not allowed to employ previously, and numbers are increasing, so lecturer-student ratio must improve. Let's listen to these clips at the end of the negotiations, what Closer had to say, the Deputy Minister for Employment on Labor, what he had to say, and what the Deputy General Secretary of the TUC had to say.
And government says they are going to consult. We also stated that we're going to meet our constituents and then we also give them feedback. So this is how we ended. We are not being unfair. As you are aware, we've read the budget and there's an indication that there will be an increase in VAT of 2.5. And then also it has been indicated that the tax brackets are going to change. So this is fresh information that we've brought on the table. Because the budget has indicated certain issues relating to VAT and the tax bracket that is going to increase our burden. And so we need to compensate for that.
We have had to table something anytime we have met. But Labour insists on a figure. So we are going back and we'll reconvene. I am disturbed. I am disturbed. But in the spirit of negotiation, we will go back and come again. It's about money. It's about ability to pay. So I am also worried that they are also not moving to come and meet us at where we can come to a compromise. Because for the fourth consecutive times, we have had to table something. And Labour says that they are unwilling to take it. So it's a clear case of frustration, very genuine one indeed. So it is not like I am not happy. Of course, you don't want me to be happy when there is this state of affairs. Well, we are going back to look at what we can do, and then if we can go further, we will let the media know.
I don't agree with you that it will be difficult. We've never been difficult. We've been considerate for years, and many things have gone wrong. So I think that is the time to right the wrongs. the single pay salary structure is the most indecent structure in this very country. And we think that this is the opportunity time for us to right the wrongs. So we have not been difficult. We are the same union leaders. We are the same people that took the 4 and 7%. We are the same people who are asking for 60, and the reasons are written clearly on the wall. We will never take anything below the 60%. We are not representing ourselves. We are representing our constituents. And we have to go back and inform our members who sent us to negotiate for them.
Right. So you heard the Deputy Employment Minister, Bright Rekubrobe, frustrated about the developments, and you heard, labor leaders insisting they're standing their ground. Nothing should change. They want 65% raise. Dr. Nyakotu, the question that many are asking is that you appear to be acting as if you are oblivious of the developments across the world, and particularly Ghana's case, which is actually worse. Hello, Doc.
Samson, we are not oblivious. We are fully aware of what's happening in this country and across the world. We are fully aware that our members staying in Kaswa have had to endure much higher increases in trotro fares from Kaswa to the ministries. We are fully aware that because of increases in cement prices, rent have gone up for our members. We are fully aware that school fees have gone up for private schools, and we are fully aware that today it costs more to put food on the table for yourself and your children. But you see, the problem is that many people talking about wages, the economy, don't talk about these household issues. We talk about the budget deficit that has been presented. We talk about the revenues that are not meeting expenditure, the national level deficit. But also a household deficit. What households require, workers require to be able to have basic living for themselves and their family. What they require compared to their earnings is woefully inadequate. And that deficit, nobody talks about it. In fact, it is more serious. It is more serious a deficit than the government deficit that you find in the budget. So we are not oblivious at all. We know what our members are going through. And we know, as the Deputy Secretary General said, it is about time we correct the wrongs of the past. And what we are simply saying is that just restore, just make sure that the massive declines in earnings actually stop. We don't want those massive declines to continue in 2023. That's all that we are asking for.
Yes, but the circumstances are such that you can only ask for so much, are they not? I don't know. Elsewhere you see strikes going on, and they are asking that their wages be pegged to the inflation. In the UK, they have announced various strikes, particularly those who are in charge of the rail, and the rail system is sort of the backbone of the transportation system in the UK, and they have announced and they have staggered how they want the strikes to go on. But the government, if you follow the discussion, is clear about it, that we are in this together. There has to be some burden sharing, and we can only offer so much. So at this time, we can't actually give you anything.
So in 2021, we shared a bigger part of the burden, 4%. 2022, 7%. And our members can no longer reproduce themselves. And I mean, it is important to know that if you say in the UK they have pegged their expectations at inflation level, I'm sure you know the inflation level in Ghana today. It is 40.4% compared to the 18% government is offering. But Samson, it is also important to put the labor proposals in proper perspective.
All right.
The single span salary structure there's what we call the base pay, the minimum pay. The agreement we had with government, and this is not supposed to even be an agreement, it's supposed to be common sense. When single spine began in 2010, we said that they should never go below the minimum wage. Today, the minimum is 14 Ghana cedis, 88 pesos per day. But the base pay on the single spine salary structure is 11,633 pesos. So it means that the base pay is lower than the minimum wage. We are asking government to put it at least at par with the minimum wage, so that we don't get to pay anybody below the minimum wage, which, as you know, is not proper, it's not legal. And then we are also asking that in 2010, the base pay was 10% above the minimum wage. So just add that 10%. And that takes you to about 44%. But you also know that we recently secured a COLA of 15%.
Right.
What I'm asking is that keep that COLA. So when you add that COLA to the 44, you get something like 59, and then we round it up to 60%. But something that is not all. You know, on the base pay, there are what we call pay points. So between the very base pay and the next one, there's a percentage difference. That percentage difference is about 1.7%. When we started the single spine salary structure, the idea was that we will push from 1.7% to 2% at some point. We are 12 years into the single spine, no movement has been done. So again, we are asking that we should push it from 1.7% to 2%. Now, Samson, when you do all of these things together, we are asking for something in excess of 100%. That is if you pushed from the 1.7% to 2%. So what government needs to do, instead of coming with 18%, 15%, what is government's take on all of these components or the proposal that has been presented by organized labor? Because there are various components, they just add up to something. What is government's take on the 1.7% going to 2%? What is government take on keeping the 15% COLA? What is government take on moving the base pay from its current level to the minimum wage level? The reason why labor is not moving is that government is not saying anything about distance. All that is saying is that, okay, we offer 12%, we offer 15%, we offer 18%. But you see, our objective in this negotiation is simply to stop the massive declines in real incomes. And the figures are there. Take fiscal service expenditure data. And you see the basic amount people have to spend on transportation, on food, on healthcare, on education, and compare that to the average pay on the single spine. You see that households, workers have much bigger deficit than the government deficit. That is always the front line, in the front lines of the newspapers and on radio stations.
Kofi, I bring you in before we have fair wages, or Beatrice will speak before fair wages. You know, sometimes fair wages, that's a bit of a mediation role in the system. We don't know now whether they themselves have fair wages to be able to mediate, because the system is something else. And we will show you some graphics very soon, doing a comparative analysis of salaries of Article 71 holders and public sector. You're looking at the average Article 71 office holder, how much they are getting, and you know the average, the least earner, Article 71, the least earner, as at I think 2016 was 11,661 Ghana cedis. If you are on the single spine, then the least earner is getting 178 cedis, a difference of 11,483 cedis. It's absolutely unconscionable. How do we get to rationalize all of these? And sometimes Dr. Yakuo too and the rest of them, they talk, we hear them, you can clearly see their pain, and yet the response that must come doesn't seem to come. Yesterday, Kofi, I was listening to the Super Morning Show where young, girls and one boy were put on the show. They were talking about how to help their parents in these difficult times. And you could tell how they appreciate what is going on. And one of them almost got me to tears because she felt their parents can still help them somewhat, but there are people who just can't get a meal a day to eat. And just because of that, she was overwhelmed and she was weeping. How to assist such people? How do you explain that the least earner for an Article 71 holder is 11,661, and the least earner on the single spine salary structure is 178 cedis? What do you do with that when Kenke is sold at 5 cedis? Yes, Kofi?
Right, Samson. So we have had a long history in Mani of commenting on salaries, civil service, productivity, etc. And for the record, if you go back, you will note that we complained, we gave reasons, we wrote papers on why Fair Wages Commission will not succeed. As we speak, they have failed. Sorry, we can analyze that and we can prove that. I'm saying this to a point. Number two, we wrote a lot and complained a lot and analyzed a lot and debated a lot about why single spine, what we call S4, was not going to succeed, was going to dump a lot of cost on us, but was not going to increase productivity. Over the years, what we predicted has happened. The point is this: we have been failing at dealing with public sector wages in this country over time. But I have news. Part of the problem has been productivity, the productivity of the people in the civil and public services, which we've all complained about. The news I have is that all the analysis we are doing now, everything we are seeing now, and I'm saying here now, is that zero of the problem is with the public and civil servants. All the problems are with the leaders. Let me explain. Simple economics. If you are an employer, you know this. When you employ somebody, the person's wages is not a net loss to you because the person helps you to make more money than you pay them. So if you take the civil and public servants, the government workers, whatever we are paying them, if they were producing well enough, will not be a net loss. It won't be a problem. It will be a fraction of what they are making. So why do we have a problem? We do have a problem because, one, the politicians, even in private sector, it comes down to leadership. It comes down to what managers and leaders do to make sure that you get the best out of your workers. And leadership in this context is the politicians and our leaders. It is very clear to us over the years that the lack of productivity in the civil and public service is not because of lack of capacity. Indeed, we've looked at the private sector and looked at the public sector. The public sector has about 3 times more qualifications than the private sector. And whenever they move, whether to international organizations or into the private sector, they produce massively. So why don't they get the same levels of productivity when they are in the civil and public services? It's because of the leadership and the political messing up of that space. It's because people are appointing political misfits into office. It is because you have square, pegs in round holes. It is simply because the leadership there is poor at every level. To that extent, we should not be blaming the public sector workers for the lack of productivity. In fact, we've said something else as part of this discussion, that what we need to do is what we call competitor parity. Look, if you take the Auditor General's department, the auditors there are as competent as the ones in KPMG. All right? If you let them work, they'll work. So there are ways to go about it. That is not why we are here, so I'm not going to go through it. So let me make this point. I believe later on we can expand it. I am fully in support of everything that Labour is demanding.
Even at this time, 65% at this time.
Yes, and I'll explain to you why.
We are at IMF, we are begging. Without that, we are doomed.
Let me finish my point. You are talking about inflation. You are talking about devaluation of the currency working together. Their wages have been where they are. And you are talking about a situation where they are not able to even make enough on the side of whatever it is. So, given inflation, given devaluation, which is directly because of actions, omissions of government, they have a right to demand it. Then this is the last point, and I made this point on the Super Morning Show. You have a situation in Article 71, where the people who are elected and people appointed to serve us, to be the people to lead this nation to prosperity, are raping us. they have become predatory. They have a separate set of rules for themselves. You just read the minimum wage under Article 71. I know stories of people whose cars were 4 years old. How bad is a 4-year-old Land Cruiser? And then they have a new set, of allocations. And one of them was saying, oh, they bought their 4x4. Now they have enough money to buy a Fortuner. They're not sure what to do. They are raping the nation. As long as Article 71, and let me make a point. In Article 71, the Constitution does not say this is it and you have to take it by force. It says that your salaries and wages and also perquisites shall be determined by a committee. What it means is that some people will sit down, look at the conditions around, look at the things going on in the country, and decide that this is what is right for you. Whenever they sit down to determine, they go up. And now they are paying themselves astronomical sums of money. And if you take the situation of the Council of State, people are feeling ashamed to take the money they have been given. And they are not doing any necessary work over there. So as long as the leaders who are negotiating with these labor people are paying themselves all those crazy sums of money, riding in 5.7 liter vehicles all around, when they can't afford it personally, some of them, they should continue to demand it. And we have another set of Article 71 plus, what we call them. They are not even in Article 71. They are political appointees and attachments. And they have now arrogated to themselves Article 71 pay. So you have a situation where less than 1 million people are just leasing the country off.
You're talking about the guys at the presidency, which list keeps bloating.
Yes, they are one of those groups. Article 71 plus are people who don't belong in Article 71. It's the principle I'm talking about. You have the political elite, people who have the power, just getting into our resources and spending it. And then you tell labor not to ask for what is inflation, what is devaluation in our currency. They are having to deal with situations. And when you want to solve a problem of food prices, you bring a few truckloads of plantain to the ministries and you think you solve the problem.
Okay.
Look, Samson, our leaders have the solution. If they want to reform the civil and public services, they should reform it for productivity. Then their salaries will not be a net negative. If they pay them well, they will still work more. Until then, labor should continue to insist on what they are demanding. It is fair.
Bitri, let's say Bitri Sanan is an aspiring Article 71 office holder. What do you make of the analysis that we put on the screen? The highest Article 71 earner, we're talking 2016, is about 30,000 cedis.
Wow.
And the highest single spine earner is 4,300.
Yeah.
That's incorrect. And then the average, 18,000 for Article 71. The average for single spine is 1,128 cedis. And then I spoke about the lists, where the list Article 71 is 11,661. And then the list for single spine is 178. This is 2020 Emoluments Committee. The source is what we are referring to. So if you want to challenge it, that's where you go. Yes. What do you say about this and what labor is insisting on?
I think that the point has to be made that labor is right. Labor actually constitutes the very microcosm of the bigger economy. And so it is not the case that the macroeconomic indicators of the country is just depleting away and labor's life will be better. I think that point has to be made. And so if the economy is not doing well, it's obvious households are not doing well. And labor is a very important arm of every nation when we want to develop. Now, it is important to state that in determining the salaries and wages of labor, it should and it ought to be pegged with inflation. And in our country, there's steep depreciation of the cedi and the standard of living. I have heard government communicators and people in the labor space who are pro-employer say that we have to look at both sides, that the government does not have money to pay, what labor is demanding. I think
That is fact.
I don't think so, because you see, the optics do not support this. I cannot assume that that will be factual. When you look at how government officials are going about their daily lives, and even if you look at the 2023 budget, and I'll come there, you cannot tell labor that the least of you should be earning 178 cedis when you have government officials flying to Qatar to watch the football match at the expense of labor. And so labor will say that, oh, if there is any jet to fly, we also want to be in a position to go to Qatar and watch the football match. Because sometimes the data is as important as the optics. Now, if you look at the government of Ghana allocation for 2023 in the budget, the government has earmarked to pay 44.99 billion as compensation.
Yes.
And then when it comes to interest payments, the government is doing 52.55. What it means is that this government has recklessly managed the economy so much that the monies which go into payment of interest is more than what it is allotting or has allocated for labor, at a time when we are being told that inflation is 40.4%. And so if, from the data you showed on the screen, if anybody in the public sector was earning 4,324, which is supposed to be the highest of the earning, if you do a 40.4% depreciation of that amount, technically the person is going home with just about 3,000 or less. And so they would demand that. But one would have thought that governments will make all these, or governments will make the situation such that many would empathize and say that labor, hold your breath, but it's not doing so. This is a government that is telling us that we are so broke, and as a result, I have to increase VAT from 12.5% to 15%. And it is going to have a cascading effect. And so if you look at a 21% increase, labor will be part of those who are buying these goods and services. And so given the depreciation of 40.4, they cannot add an additional 21% to it at the same interest. So that's why they are asking for 65.
I remember what has happened to e-levy too.
So I'll come there. And if you look at, despite all these, one would have thought that the government will say, oh, I'm bringing some austere measures so that labor and ourselves can share. The government has increased its expenditure by 51%. In the 2020 budget, the government budgeted to spend 137 billion. In the 2023 budget, as we speak, the government is spending 205 billion. So if you have increased government expenditure by 51%, without showing where those increases will go or how they will impact on labor directly, which is supposed to be one of the arms of taking chunk of government expenditure, then labor will be asking all these questions, because on the part of government, there is no prudence. One would say that the government has come out to announce some austere measures to show that, oh, labor, you are not in this alone. But Samson, those measures were announced as far back as this year, March. And there were no implementations. Those measures have been repeated. So it becomes difficult to even tell labor that to hold on, because the government, which is the employer, is not showing any sign that we cannot afford the 65%, except to say that, you know what, we can afford an inflated budget, we can afford an increase in our expenditure, but we just cannot afford to bring labor in. And you don't expect anybody to accept that. And like Dr. Kwabena said, when we are talking about the cost of living, it is not just the cost of living, but the standard of living in the average Ghanaian lives have practically reduced. Something I know lawyers who don't drive to court any longer. These days they are doing carpooling in the firms. These are supposed to be people in society who are privileged. I know medical doctors who are no longer driving. So you can imagine what the ordinary person who is not even a professional or the teeming unemployed people are going through.
Somebody has been drawing my attention to the reduce traffic in town.
Reduce traffic in town.
I've experienced it
Yes,
myself.
yes. And I know families who have now drawn a meal table that we eat breakfast at 10 and we eat lunch at 2:33, so that it's like an intermittent fasting. These are people who are employed in the public sector. So consistently, the communication cannot be that labor should suffer against the background that the government is unable to manage the CD or our currency. The government is unable to manage its expenditure, and expect that every time we call labor to fasten its belt, while the government loosens its stomach and consume more. It is just unfair, and I will support the call by labor to hold governments responsible. Because you see something, the point also has to be made that it is unconscionable that at a time when we are all agreeing that if you look at the space, one of the least paid people or some of the least paid people are in the public sector. You have a government that is bent on spending so much in building a national cathedral. As we speak, we are being told by the Auditor General's report that 142 million cedis have been spent. In the 2023 budget, they've earmarked to spend 80 million. So when you add all these other ancillary...
The budget has even projected for the cathedral beyond the...
Beyond 2023,
25 or so.
Yes,
so
they proceeded.
I don't know why. Is that done in a budget when you know your life terminates 2024, and then you project a budget far beyond your...
Yes, normally they have a 20 or a 5-year or 4-year projections so that it can guide their planning. But that should tell labor that with this government in power, there is no future for labor, because if you look at its other allocation, government says that other expenditure which we cannot tell what they are, the government is spending has increased that expenditure from 8.34 to 26.74, moving an expenditure from 8.634 to 26.74 at a time when you have these very fundamental issues to address. And every budget is supposed to be the economic policy of the government. And in addressing that economic policy, you cannot do so without addressing labor. So you can't keep telling us, or the government cannot have a shifting tongue and keep saying that, you know what, let's all fasten our belt, let's all engage in some measures to save the country. And then government does not show that it is committed to doing something. Young people are suffering, and if you look at the unemployment rate, which is 13.6 as we speak, and the fact that there is going to be an employment freeze, not even a net, all young people do not have an opportunity of being part of the public sector. What one would have expected is that for those already there, you would even make their lives better and not worse.
Right.
So you cannot mismanage the fundamentals. And when labor complain about the fundamental, you say you have an issue with it.
Let me hear from Dr. Benata, Chief Executive of the Fair Wages Commission, and then we'll take a quick break and return for our final, comment. Now, I remember when I was showing the slides, you were disagreeing on the amount, and the highest amount I referred to for Article 71 was just about 30,000. I appreciate where you may be coming from. The fact being that what the Emoluments Committee, as it were, proposed is not what the executive stuck to. So it's actually higher than this, as we know. The figures are far higher than what we have used for the analysis. But some would ask...
But Samson, let me help you with the figures.
Yes.
So in 2016, the Emolument Committee proposed 22,000 Ghana cedis for the president.
Right.
It was eventually increased to 29,000, the figure you have there.
That's right.
That figure. In 2020, the figure 30,000 now goes to about 47,000.
Right.
But you should compare that with the figure on the single spine, which the minimum figure on the single spine today is about 414 Ghana cedis and not the 178.
Okay. 414. Thank you very much. And I'm just going to refer to, this is an extract from the executive summary of the report of the Professor Yaya Ntamu Abedu Presidential Committee on Emoluments for Article 71 office holders, June 2020. The committee strongly urges the government to also spare no effort at reducing the wide gap between the highest and the lowest paid public servant in the country. The goal must be that the salary earned by every worker should enable him or her to live in dignity, as the Constitution says. Why are we still here?
Anyway, thank you very much. Let me take this opportunity to greet our viewers. You may have to give me some ample time.
Sure.
Because
we'll take a quick break and come back.
For interventions.
Yes, once you do, once you speak for about 5 minutes, we'll take a quick break.
Oh, 5 minutes.
5 minutes is a lot of time on prime time.
Let me proceed from where my sister left off. I will be addressing some of the issues as we move along. In the first place, organized labor has future with government, simply because the crisis that we face is not just unique to Ghana. We can go into the details and its theories, but this is a government that during the COVID-19 pandemic, many nations laid off workers. There was not a single public sector worker who lost his or her job. It came at a cost. So when you say on air that organized labor do not have a future with this government, that is not supported by the fact. We alluded to the point where my sister also mentioned that, of course, once we have unemployment rates going up in this country, and there's a freeze on employment proposed by the budget, is going to lead into dire, consequences. If you also care to know, to get same from the budget, it's the same budget that talks about Youth Start program, which is a program that is going to give the youth, ample opportunities to be entrepreneurs. And I've already stated on several platforms that Ghana's structure of economy by way of employment sections or sectors is such that we have over 85% of all employed persons in Ghana being self-accounting as self-account workers with employees or just one person working. So if we want to really open up the opportunities in this country for people to be hired, the best approach is entrepreneurship. We have the Job and Skills Project that is also giving opportunities. In fact, across the globe, there is no single government that, by way of proportion, that is increasing its portion of employment. Worldwide, the government's ability, by way of percentages to hire people, is going down. So the way forward is to ensure that we get graduates to get into entrepreneurship, develop the ability to hire their own colleagues, and we'll move forward from there. And it is contained in the same budget. I may not want to go into details in debating the budget because that's not what I'm here for. Dr. Kofi Bentil, the lawyer, stated that fair wages has failed. I beg to differ. The single spine salary pay policy is the single pay policy that has lasted the longest in the history of Ghana. We have had several pay policies that, have seen operations as far as regimes are concerned. We've had the goods, we have had other ones, we have had the price and incomes, but that eventually gave way to the Fair Wages and Salaries Commission. If you look at the single span pay policy, government admits, and by so doing, we are even, there is a committee that is formed under the National Tripartite Committee to get it reviewed. So we admit that there are some areas that needs review, and we have far advanced as far as the review process is concerned in terms of the reporting, so that it could go to cabinet or get organized labor engaged. It becomes a policy for implementation. So we admit that there are certain aspects of the single span pay policy that ought to be reviewed, and it's currently being done. But that is not to say that the Fair Wages, and Salaries Commission has failed. It is not supported.
I ask a direct question. Are you supervising or ensuring that this is done as the Yaintia Bedu presidential commission said?
I'm coming.
You need to reduce the gap. It's too wide between the highest and the lowest paid public
you may have
servants
to
in
be
the country.
very patient.
People are receiving what we can clearly say reduces them to less human.
I'm coming to that. The issue with productivity in the public sector and the civil service, if I should say public sector to engulf all of them, of course, I agree with Kofi Bentil on that. And it is not as if we are not doing anything. Currently, we are collaborating with MDPI, NDPC, we are collaborating with the Public Services Commission to make sure that the performance management system in the public service is reviewed in such a way that we'll be able to link pay to productivity. So that is very key. But fair wages does not determine Article 71 office holders' pay. And for your information, we do not determine that. There's a different mechanism for determining that. And if we really want to vary it, the way forward is to support a constitutional review, so that at the end of the day,
why are we blaming it on the Constitution?
No, I'm saying that the way forward.
The Constitution doesn't say pay yourselves 40 something, almost 50,000 a month. The Constitution doesn't say those who are heads of the state-owned enterprises, some of them should be earning over 80,000 a month and getting a DSTV allowance, getting a lens allowance for the lenses they wear. The Constitution doesn't say that.
Samson, what I'm trying to arrive at is to tell us that when it comes to fair wages, I'll come to the other issues that you have raised. When it comes to fair wages, we don't have jurisdiction in that area at all.
You should be advocating.
So coming back to the comparison, oftentimes I have heard these arguments over and over again. Article 71 office holders pay per the wage bill is not up to 0.1%. That is not to say that the disparities that you are, displaying on air now does not exist.
Okay.
That's not to say that.
Thanks for.
But I just want you to know that the mechanisms for even evaluating the jobs of Article 71 office holders within themselves is very different. For example, if you go to Parliament, how are you going to evaluate the work of parliamentarians through the way we do at fair wages? You have PhD holders who are first-time MPs. You might have a secondary school leaver who might be an MP. You have people who have been MPs for, say, 4, 3, 5 terms. You have somebody who has just arrived. How are you going to do that?
The Constitution says equal pay for equal work.
Of course.
We'll take a break here and return shortly. We'll be right back. You're welcome back. This is Newsfile. It's your most authoritative news analysis platform. And here on Newsfile, we put Ghana first. My guest discussing organized labor's rejection of government's 18% as far as the base pay is concerned. Beatrice Annan, member legal and communications team, National Democratic Congress. Dr. Kwabena Nyakootu is Chief Economist and Director, Labor Research and Policy Institute of the TUC. We also have Ben Arthur, who is Chief Executive, Fair Wages and Salaries Commission, who was speaking before we went on the break. Kofi Bentil, lawyer and Senior Vice President, Imani Africa, is also on. Clearly unhappy about the way there's a lack of leadership in some of these matters. And if you have heard him in the course of the week, together with the CDD's Kojo Asante, they are very unhappy. At the moment, we have Professor Stephen Adair joining the discussion about government showing that it appreciates what is going on. The president is not cutting down, downsizing. People like Professor Adair suggest he can downsize to up to about 40 ministers, and he's not doing it. Doesn't seem to want to listen to anybody about these things. They say V8s, there's a certain suspension on some of them. We don't know how exactly all of that is going to happen. So people are really unhappy. While taxes are being increased, those who are supposed to show that we are in austere moments don't appear to be doing that. And yet they are taking money from us to fund that kind of life, which people are very unhappy about. The budget was read, and the budget discussion, debate in Parliament, MPs from the NPP or government side are in Qatar and watching football. The president also flew out, and people say, Pumpuni Asante says, this is an insult. He feels insulted that he's paying tax and the people he's paying the tax to don't respect him in the manner that they conduct themselves. Right. So you were making that point that maybe the comparison may not be the best, but the expectation in the public is that you should be able to play some role, to bring down the unconscionable, salary regime and the gap too wide between the 71 people who are leaders and the public servants.
I alluded to the fact that for us to be able to go that far, of course, there are two separate regimes for the determination. So definitely we will need mandate to do that. And I do not throw away the suggestion that we should be up and doing about it. So I take that advice accordingly. But going forward, I take this opportunity to plead with organized labor. Government position is not to say that they are not deserving of what they are asking.
Okay.
And we have been very consistent with that.
Okay.
We have never stated anywhere for anybody to carry on as a vote to say that government is insensitive and that fair wages and the bodies that lead the negotiation do not understand the plight of organized labor. We do. In fact, you must also admit that we are all workers. The president is a worker, myself, I'm a worker, my sector minister is a worker. But you see, there's one thing that we must...
But don't use those as examples, because everything they have is paid for.
I'm only telling you that we are all workers in this country. And that what organized labor faces as a challenge is not in isolation. Government equally faces a similar challenge. So the way forward that we have been asking... But
obviously those are the top. Don't feel it as, other people who are earning
you may have to allow me
400 that we are talking about.
You may have to allow me to make progress. So we all agree. But you see, we live in a country where we have about 50% of our tax revenue going into compensation. Whatever your mathematics and proportions might be, going into compensation. We need to be worried a bit, because what happens to, say, goods and services? If we're going to pay so much on compensation in such a way that you will not be able to make available goods and services for the same workers to use, precisely, you are not going to be able to give materials or provide materials for work, which is the obligation of the employer. If you are not going to be able to give equipment or provide equipment and satisfactory work environment for the same employees, what it means is that yes, you will be paying the wages, but you are not going to get the people productive. Okay. And I can tell you that it has its own implications. Right.
Dr. Kwabena Yakwotu, we have just about 2 minutes to get out of the studio. Having listened to him, having listened to him, and I'm also concerned about why is it that from your end too, you are not pushing this recommendation to get, things change about the emoluments?
We have pushed for this in any one of our submissions. We have said it. And you see, the effect of this differential is that there's no way you can get people on the single spine to kind of agree with government, when in fact, when it comes to your own pay, you have money to pay. And Samson, let me tell you that the minimum pay on Article 71 is about 17,000 now. And I'm not going to mention institution. These are institutions where, if you check the constitution, they are supposed to, the commissioners or whatever, they are supposed to actually meet 6 times in a year. And they take 7,000 Ghana cedis a month. The civil servants there, working from Monday to Friday for 27 days, actually take about 2,000 Ghana cedis. These kinds of differences have to be bridged. And you are right, Samson, when you say that the Constitution doesn't tell us how much you should pay anybody. The first Article 71 committee actually put Article 71 office holders on the existing salary structure at the time. I mean, the way forward from now is to, if the government really thinks that times are hard, is to bring all the ministers onto single span. Bring everybody, all the appointees onto the single span. But on question of productivity, let me say that something. There are challenges there, and there are challenges with political leadership for the civil service and everything. But workers in this country are doing their best for Ghana. Take the police. In spite of all the problems, Ghana is relatively peaceful. Crime rates are down. It is because the police are doing their work. In spite of all the challenges, the nurses and the doctors are keeping this nation healthy. Other people from other countries are coming.
All right.
It's an indication.
Okay.
They are doing something. And you cannot say that this country is so less productive.
I'm sorry, but we have run out of time. But because this is a continuing discussion between organized labor and the government, I'm sure we will return to this in our next edition of the show, and so spend sufficient time to try and exhaust this issue. My outfit, as always, is by Habil Couture. You can find them at Ajiringano Gate, East Legon, and you call them on 0200 84 1988. My guests have been Ben Arthur, Chief Executive, Fair Wages and Salaries Commission, Dr. Kwabena Nyako Otu, Chief Economist and Director, Labor Research and Policy Institute, TUC. Kofi Bentel is lawyer and Senior Vice President, Imani Africa. Beatrice Annan, Member Legal and Communications Team of the NDC. I'm Samson Lardy Anyenini. Thank you for your company. Have a good afternoon.